My sibling slept with my cheating girlfriend, and she was expecting months before our engagement party. So I beat him up and kicked her out while our mom and dad supported my brother and begged for forgiveness on their knees. But I told them to go to hell and got my payback. Hey Reddit, my name is Marcus, and I'm 29 years old. I live in Tampa where I work as a supply chain coordinator. Up until recently, my life was pretty boring and routine. Just the typical day-to-day grind that most people know. But everything changed when I discovered something that completely shattered my world and showed me who my family really was. I'm the oldest of two brothers. My younger brother Tyler is 26, and to put it bluntly, we were never exactly close growing up. That's probably the nicest way I can phrase it without sounding completely bitter about the whole situation. The truth is, from as far back as I can remember, it was always crystal clear who the favorite child was in our household. I know every older sibling probably says this at some point, but I'm not talking about minor stuff here. This wasn't just about getting slightly less attention or having to share toys. I'm talking about full-blown golden child treatment that was so obvious it was almost comical. My parents, Robert and Linda, used to constantly tell me that Tyler just needed more attention than I did. He's sensitive, my mom would always say with this apologetic tone. You're older, Marcus. You need to be the example for him. What this basically translated to in practice was that Tyler got soft landings for everything, while I got lectures and consequences for the smallest infractions. I could get grounded for something as minor as breathing wrong, or forgetting to put my dishes in the dishwasher. Meanwhile, Tyler could literally crash the family car, which actually happened when he was 17, and somehow end up with a pizza party that same weekend, because my parents felt bad that he was stressed about the accident. That kind of backwards logic happened constantly throughout our childhood and teenage years. By the time we both hit our 20s, I was already emotionally checked out from the family dynamic. I moved out as soon as I could scrape together enough money to afford my own place. I worked my way through college with 2 part-time jobs, barely sleeping most nights, just grinding it out because I knew I couldn't rely on my parents for financial support the way Tyler could. Eventually, I landed my current role as a supply chain coordinator at a mid-sized firm. It's decent work, and I was finally able to build my own life away from all the drama. Tyler, on the other hand, took a completely different path. He bounced between technical college programs, short-term gigs that never seemed to work out, and startup ideas that somehow always needed more money from my parents to get off the ground. Every few months, he'd have some new business opportunity or investment idea that required another loan from Robert and Linda. They called him ambitious and creative. I called it what it was, complete bullshit. But I had stopped bringing up my concerns years ago because every time I did, it always turned into me being painted as the negative one. I was apparently just jealous of Tyler's creativity and entrepreneurial spirit. According to my family, I was too practical, too focused on traditional success, and I didn't understand that Tyler was just built differently. So I learned to keep my distance and my opinions to myself. This was especially true during family holidays, where I felt like I was either completely invisible or serving as the designated punching bag for everyone's passive-aggressive comments. Somehow, every conversation would eventually turn into some kind of backhanded remark about my life choices. Wow, you're still renting an apartment? My mom would say, with this fake surprise tone. Or my dad would casually mention that. Tyler has been really thinking about launching something big soon, followed by, Marcus, do you ever consider doing something different with your life? It was all just passive-aggressive nonsense disguised as innocent small talk, but the message was always clear. I was the boring, safe one who wasn't living up to my potential, while Tyler was the exciting one with big dreams and endless possibilities. About 4 years ago, everything started to change when I met Victoria. She was a friend of a friend at a birthday dinner that I had almost skipped entirely. I wasn't actively looking for a relationship at the time, but Victoria came into my life like a whirlwind. She was confident, opinionated, and really focused on goal setting and knowing your worth as a person. She made a huge deal about having standards and getting what she deserves in life. At first, I brushed off some of her more intense opinions as just her being assertive and knowing what she wanted. Honestly, I actually liked that she didn't make me feel like I had to constantly prove myself or jump through hoops to earn her attention. We talked all night at that birthday dinner, then found ourselves talking again the next day. Pretty soon, we were seeing each other regularly, and things felt natural between us. Things moved pretty fast, but in a good way initially. After about a year of dating, we decided to move in together. Victoria worked in HR at a mid-sized company and made decent money, so we were able to split expenses pretty evenly. She had this very clear, detailed picture of what life should look like by the time you hit 30. A house, marriage, regular vacations, couples fitness goals, the whole suburban dream package. I was genuinely down for most of it because I'd always wanted something stable and long-term. After years of dealing with my chaotic family dynamics, I craved having someone to come home to and someone to build a real future with. Victoria first met Tyler at my birthday dinner about 2 years ago. After that night, she mentioned that he was more charming and outgoing than she had expected based on the stories I'd told her about him. At first, I didn't think much of her comment. I figured maybe she was just surprised that my little brother wasn't a complete screw-up in person, especially since he had managed to clean himself up enough that night to pass for someone who actually had their life together. Good for him, I thought. But after that dinner, Victoria started bringing Tyler up randomly in our conversations. She'd make comments like, "Your brother's got such good style," or "Tyler told me about this app he's thinking of launching. Sounds pretty cool, right?" And yeah, I'd get a little annoyed when she did this, but I never wanted to be that insecure boyfriend who freaks out every time his partner mentions another guy. Even if that other guy happened to be my own damn brother. Family events started feeling weird after that. Tyler would make these little digs at me that were masked as jokes, saying things like, "Victoria must be a saint for putting up with your spreadsheets and cargo shorts." I'd laugh it off even though it genuinely bugged me, and Victoria would laugh along too. I told myself it was just typical brother behavior, and that I was probably being too sensitive about it. Eventually, I decided it was time to propose. I kept it simple, nothing too elaborate or over the top. When I asked her, she said yes. We both cried, we hugged, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally on the right path. After spending so many years being the invisible son, the backup plan, the guy who always seemed to get the short end of every stick, I finally had something good in my life. Something that was just mine. My parents barely reacted when I told them about the engagement. They offered a polite congratulations, but there was no real excitement or enthusiasm behind it. Tyler sent me a text that just said, "Congrats, bro," with a party emoji. That was it. No phone call, no offer to take us out to dinner, nothing that felt genuinely celebratory. Victoria and I agreed to have a longer engagement so we could save up for a house and avoid going into debt for the wedding. I was completely fine with this plan because it seemed practical and responsible. Victoria said she liked the idea too because it gave us room to breathe and plan everything properly. Though I noticed she didn't exactly cut back on her online shopping or her regular nail appointments during this saving period. But I let that slide because relationships are supposed to be about balance and compromise, right? Around this time, my workload picked up significantly. 2 people in my department quit within the same week, so suddenly I was doing supply chain work and operations management for almost an entire team by myself. I was pulling late nights and working weekends regularly. It wasn't supposed to be forever, just until we could get new hires trained up to speed. Victoria said she understood the situation and that she supported me working hard for our future. But I noticed that as soon as I started working these longer hours, she became more distant and critical. Suddenly, everything became, "Well, you're not even here anymore," or "I feel like I'm planning this wedding completely alone." Meanwhile, I was the one running all the budget numbers, checking vendor contracts, and making sure we weren't going to start our marriage buried in debt. But apparently, that kind of contribution didn't count as wedding planning in her mind. Then came the engagement party, which turned into the first real warning sign that I should have paid more attention to. Victoria wanted something she described as small and elevated, so we ended up renting an event space downtown. Her parents helped cover part of the bill, which was generous of them. My parents, on the other hand, didn't even ask if we needed financial help or if they could contribute anything. When I mentioned the party to them, my mom just said, "I assume you want us there," in this flat, disinterested tone. My dad's only response was, "Just send us the address." That was the level of warmth and enthusiasm I got from my own parents about my engagement celebration. I handled all the logistics on my end, managing RSVPs, coordinating with vendors, handling the setup details. Victoria focused on picking out the decor and told me to just trust her vision, which basically translated to, stand back and nod at everything I choose. I did exactly that because I wanted her to be happy, and I figured she had better taste than me anyway. Tyler rolled up to the party 25 minutes late, wearing sunglasses indoors like he was walking into some kind of concert or celebrity event. He had on a designer hoodie with some brand name that I was pretty sure my parents had paid for, given his track record with employment. He walked straight up to Victoria first, gave her a hug that seemed to linger just half a second too long for my comfort, then turned to me and clapped me on the back like we were old buddies. "Looking sharp, Marcus," he said, with this grin that felt a little too practiced. Victoria immediately chimed in with, "Yes, it's a miracle, isn't it?" and started laughing like she'd just made the funniest joke in the world. I didn't laugh. I looked Tyler directly in the eye and said, "Glad you made it. You can find the drink table to your left and the people who still tolerate you straight ahead." He just smirked like I had told some kind of clever joke instead of basically telling him to get lost. I wasn't joking. Throughout the entire night, I noticed that Tyler stuck to Victoria like glue. He was bouncing from conversation to conversation, but always orbiting around her, always finding a way to insert himself into whatever group she was talking to. And she didn't exactly push him away or tell him to give her some space either. At one point, I was having a conversation with one of her coworkers about supply chain logistics, and when I glanced over toward the bar, I saw the two of them standing really close together. Their heads were tilted in toward each other, and she was doing that thing where she brushes her hair behind her ear while she talks, which I knew was one of her flirting habits. I walked over to where they were standing. Neither of them noticed me approaching until I was literally 2 feet away from them. "What's up?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual but probably failing. They both looked startled, like they'd been caught doing something they shouldn't have been doing. Victoria immediately laughed it off and said they were just talking about her old job and how Tyler was thinking about starting something in the tech space. You know, just casual conversation between future in-laws. I looked directly at Tyler and said, "Cool. Maybe when you finally start something that lasts longer than 6 months, we'll have something to actually talk about." Victoria rolled her eyes at me like I was being unnecessarily harsh. Tyler just changed the subject entirely, which told me everything I needed to know about how seriously he was taking this supposed tech venture. I didn't stick around for the rest of their conversation. I walked away, but not because I was hurt or emotional about it. I walked away because I had gotten exactly what I needed. Confirmation that something was definitely off about their dynamic. And I wasn't going to ignore it or pretend it wasn't happening. Later in the evening, I found Victoria alone on the balcony, which was thankfully the first time all night I'd seen her without Tyler hovering nearby. She looked stressed, with her arms crossed, scrolling through her phone with this intense focus that suggested she was dealing with something important. "Everything good?" I asked as I stepped outside to join her. She looked up from her phone and exhaled like I had just interrupted something crucial. "I just needed a breather. Your family is kind of a lot to deal with." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, they definitely can be overwhelming." She gave me this half smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Especially your mom. She kept asking me if I knew what I was getting into by marrying you." Like, what kind of question is that to ask someone at their own engagement party? I leaned against the railing next to her, trying to process this information. "Did you tell her that I'm not actually that hard to handle?" She smirked at that. "I told her I can handle anything life throws at me. I decided to test the waters a little. You seem to be getting along pretty well with Tyler tonight. I saw you two talking a lot." She shrugged like it was no big deal. "He's funnier than I expected, and honestly, it's just nice to talk to someone who gets the vibe of this kind of thing." "The vibe?" I asked, genuinely confused about what she meant. "You know, the pressure of being around people who expect you to say the right thing, wear the right outfit, smile at every bad joke that gets told. Tyler gets it because he's dealing with the same family dynamics that you are." I kept my expression neutral. "That's interesting. I didn't know he was that deep or self-aware." She laughed at that, but not like it was a compliment. It was more like she thought I was being naive or missing something obvious. "I'm not saying he's deep or some kind of philosopher. He just doesn't try so hard to manage everyone's expectations. You're always on edge around your parents, and it changes your whole energy. It's hard for me to connect with you when you get like that." That comment stung more than I wanted to admit, but I didn't let it show on my face. "I guess I just don't love being constantly reminded that I'm the spare son in this family," I said, keeping my voice even. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she just looked down at her phone and started tapping at the screen like I wasn't still standing right there next to her. Then she said, "Marcus, I don't need you reading into every single conversation I have tonight, okay? It's a party and I was just being friendly." "Okay," I said, taking a step back from the railing. "I wasn't trying to accuse you of anything." She sighed like I was making a big deal out of nothing. "You really need to stop overthinking everything that happens. It's not a good look on you." The days after the engagement party were weird in a way that's hard to describe. Victoria started keeping her phone on silent all the time, and she'd place it face down on whatever surface she was near. Before this, she used to leave it on the kitchen counter with the screen facing up, and I'd sometimes see her notifications pop up for work emails or texts from friends. Now, her phone never left her sight, and all notifications were turned off. When I asked her about the sudden change in phone habits, she got defensive incredibly fast. She said it was because she was dealing with work stress and that I was being paranoid. She also mentioned that she'd never used to be so protective of her phone, implying that this was somehow my fault for noticing the change. According to her, she was working on being more present and practicing mental clarity by reducing digital distractions. I nodded and told her, "That sounds really healthy," but inside I wasn't buying a word of it. She smiled at me like I had passed some kind of test I didn't know I was taking. I smiled back, but internally I had already flipped a switch. I'd moved from trusting to watching, and I wasn't going to announce that shift to her. I started observing her behavior more closely, but not in an obvious way. I didn't want to give her any reason to change her patterns or become more careful about hiding whatever she was doing. I just started paying attention to the little things that were piling up. Her phone was suddenly always locked, even when she was just sitting around the apartment watching TV or eating dinner. She used to leave it unlocked on the coffee table, and I'd occasionally glance at it if a notification came through. Nothing invasive, just normal couple behavior. Now it was always face down with a passcode that she'd apparently changed, because I noticed her typing in a longer sequence of numbers than before. Every time she left the apartment and came back, she seemed slightly different. Not in any dramatic way, but just off. Like she was carrying some kind of energy or mood that didn't match where she claimed to have been. Every story she told me about her day had this rehearsed quality to it, like she'd practiced the details beforehand. Around this time, Tyler reached out to me twice via text. The first message was about some investment opportunity he wanted to pitch me, some cryptocurrency thing that required a minimum investment of $5,000. The second text was just him saying, "I hope everything is going good with Kristen," which was weird because my fiance's name is Victoria, not Kristen. Either he was texting the wrong person or he was juggling multiple conversations and got confused about who he was talking to. I didn't respond to either message, but I did take screenshots of both texts and archive them in a separate folder on my phone. I had a feeling I might need evidence of our interactions later, though I wasn't entirely sure why yet. Then one night, everything started to click into place in the worst possible way. I got home late around 9:15 p.m., and the apartment was completely dark. Victoria had mentioned earlier that day that she was going to grab dinner with a friend from work, someone named Maya. But when I checked back through our text conversation, she had specifically mentioned that dinner was early, like around 6 p.m. I sat down on the couch and waited. By 10:30, she finally walked through the front door like nothing unusual had happened. But the first thing I noticed was that she smelled like perfume. And it definitely wasn't the kind she usually wears. Victoria always wore this light floral scent that I'd gotten used to over the years. This was something heavier, more musky, and definitely not hers. She looked genuinely surprised to see me still awake and sitting in the living room. "Oh, hey," she said casually as she set her purse down on the counter. Dinner ended up running really long. "Yeah?" I replied, not looking up from my laptop. "Where did you guys end up going?" She hesitated for just a beat. Not long enough for most people to notice, but I was paying close attention to everything now. That new sushi place on 5th Street. It was Maya's idea. I nodded slowly, then turned my head to look at her directly. "You hate sushi?" She blinked like she hadn't expected me to remember that detail. "I mean, yeah, but I just ordered some dumplings instead. It was fine." "You also hate dumplings," I pointed out. She forced a laugh that sounded completely unnatural. "Okay, well, I didn't want to be rude to Maya. She was really excited about trying this place." I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention. "I tried calling you earlier. Was your phone dead?" She crossed her arms defensively. "It died around 7 o'clock. Sorry, I didn't realize I needed to file a permission slip every time I want to have dinner with a coworker." "You don't need permission," I said calmly. "But if you're going to come home 3 hours later than planned, wearing someone else's perfume and telling me a story that doesn't line up with your own food preferences, maybe you should put a little more effort into making it believable. You're not even trying at this point." She stared at me with this offended expression, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Wow, so now you're tracking my food choices and accusing me of lying about where I've been?" "I'm not accusing you of anything," I said. "I'm just pointing out that your story doesn't make sense." She scoffed loudly. "You know what? Maybe if you weren't working 12-hour days and snapping at everything I say, I wouldn't feel the need to escape from this apartment once in a while. I didn't take the bait or raise my voice. So you were escaping tonight? I didn't say that, she backtracked quickly. No, but your face did, I replied. She rolled her eyes dramatically and stormed off toward the bedroom, slamming the door behind her like she was the one who had a right to be angry about this entire conversation. I sat there for a few minutes, just letting everything settle in my mind. That was the night I started writing things down. Not because I wanted to catch her in more lies, but because I already knew I had caught her. I just needed to document the pattern so I could make sense of how long this had been going on. The next morning, Victoria was back to her happy fiancé mode, acting like the confrontation from the night before had never happened. She was listening to some motivational podcast while making breakfast, frying eggs with this cheerful energy that felt completely manufactured. It was like someone had flipped a switch and she was performing the role of the perfect content girlfriend. She asked me if I could help her pick out a rug for what she called the future dining room. Her words, not mine. I told her sure to just send me the links to whatever she was considering. She smiled at me like I had just passed another test I didn't know I was taking. I smiled back, but internally I had already switched into observation mode. I wasn't going to confront her about every little thing anymore. I was going to watch, document, and wait. I started monitoring her behavior more systematically, but without being obvious about it. The little inconsistencies and changes started piling up fast once I knew what to look for. Her phone situation became even more extreme. She used to leave it on the kitchen counter with the screen facing up, casually accessible to both of us. Now it never left her sight, always sitting face down with all notifications turned off. She said this was part of her new focus on mental clarity and being more present in our relationship. I nodded and told her, that's really healthy, but I wasn't buying any of it. Every time she left the apartment and came back, there was something different about her energy. She'd return acting slightly off, not in any dramatic way, but like she was carrying some mood or experience that didn't match whatever story she told me about where she'd been. Each explanation felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced the details beforehand. I started keeping track of these patterns quietly. I wasn't going to give her any reason to change her behavior or become more careful about whatever she was hiding. I just documented everything. Times, dates, inconsistencies in her stories, changes in her routine. Meanwhile, Victoria started turning up the pressure in our relationship in ways that felt calculated. She began making more comments about how couples should function, what real men provide for their partners, and how other guys treat their fiancés. These weren't casual observations. They felt like pointed criticisms designed to make me feel inadequate. You know, Maya's fiancé already locked in their wedding venue, she said one night while scrolling through her phone. He handled the entire deposit and all the coordination without her even having to remind him about it. Another time it was, Haley's fiancé surprised her with a second engagement ring just because he wanted to. Like, who even thinks of something that thoughtful? And when I got home late after covering 2 shifts because we were still understaffed, she delivered this gem while reheating leftover pasta. I don't want to marry someone who's always running on fumes. You're exhausted all the time lately, and it's affecting everything about how you show up in this relationship. I just nodded calmly and said, yeah, it's been a heavy week at work, but I noticed she seemed annoyed that I didn't take the bait or get defensive about her criticism. A few days later, she decided to sit me down in the living room for what felt like a planned intervention. She had this serious expression, and her arms were folded, like she was about to deliver some tough love that I desperately needed to hear. I just feel like I'm the one driving this relationship forward, she began. I'm managing all the wedding planning, juggling my job responsibilities, staying in shape, keeping my social life together, and when I look at you, you're just... She waved her hand vaguely in my direction. Here. Here? I repeated, tilting my head slightly. You know what I mean, she said with exasperation. Not really, I replied honestly. I thought being present and available was kind of the whole point of being in a committed relationship. She rolled her eyes. You're physically present, but emotionally, you've been coasting for months. You're going through the motions, but you're not really engaged with building our future together. I nodded thoughtfully. Maybe you're right, or maybe I'm just not performing my engagement loudly enough for you to notice it. She narrowed her eyes at me. Don't do that thing where you deflect with clever lines. I'm trying to have a serious conversation about our relationship. So am I said evenly. I'm just not sure why being steady and reliable is being framed as a problem. About a week after that conversation, I got a direct message from someone completely unexpected. Victoria's younger sister, Lily. I had only met Lily maybe 3 times over the years. She was still in college, pretty quiet, and never really inserted herself into conversations unless someone specifically drew her in. Victoria used to roll her eyes whenever Lily came up in conversation, usually saying something like Lily's still finding herself, followed by some dismissive story about how her sister didn't understand ambition or adult relationships. So when I saw Lily's name pop up in my DMs, I was genuinely surprised. Her message said, "Hey, can I talk to you about something kind of important? It's about Victoria." That stopped me cold. I stared at the screen for several seconds, trying to decide if I even wanted to know what she had discovered. But I typed back, "Sure, are you okay?" She replied quickly, "Yeah, I'm fine, but I found something you should probably see. I'm not trying to get involved in your business, but I couldn't ignore what I found." Before I could respond, she started sending screenshots. Then another one and another one. At first, I couldn't process what I was looking at because my brain refused to accept what was right in front of me. It was Victoria's iMessage screen showing a conversation with someone saved in her contacts as simply T. The first message I could see said, "See, he's so checked out. You deserve so much better than this." The response from T, "You don't need to explain anything to me. He'll just have to accept it when the time comes." Victoria, "You're building something better now. He doesn't get a say in what you choose." T, "Let him deal with it. You're moving on and starting a real future with me." I sat back in my chair, holding my phone with my heart racing but my head strangely clear. I messaged Lily back. "Where did you get these screenshots?" She explained that Victoria had left her iPad at their parents' house a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't password protected, and when Lily opened it to check something, she saw these message conversations synced from Victoria's phone. At first, she didn't say anything because she didn't want to get involved in family drama. But after a recent fight where Victoria had screamed at their mom that Marcus is useless and holding me back, Lily decided she couldn't stay silent anymore. "There's more," she told me. "Voice memos, notes, photos. Do you want me to send everything?" I told her not to send anything else yet, to back everything up somewhere safe, and to let me call her the next day. I needed time to process what I was seeing and figure out how to handle it. That night, I sat in my apartment staring into the darkness, not confronting Victoria about what I'd discovered. Instead, I just planned. Because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was strategic, coordinated, and premeditated. And if she wanted to treat this like some kind of game, she had picked the wrong opponent. I woke up the next morning to a text from Lily that made my blood run cold. The message simply said, "You need to call me. There's more." I hadn't even fully opened my eyes yet, but something about the tone of her message was different from the night before. She had been level-headed and methodical when she first reached out to me, but this felt urgent in a way that made my stomach drop. I called her immediately. She picked up on the first ring, and without even saying hello, she just said, "She's pregnant." "What?" I said, sitting up straight in bed. "Victoria, she's pregnant, and it's Tyler's baby." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "How do you know that?" "She told our cousin last night. I saw the messages this morning when I checked the iPad again." She started sending me screenshots while we were still on the phone call. Victoria texting Tyler, time-stamped just after midnight. "Victoria, what do we do now?" Tyler, "Tell him. He needs to hear it from you before someone else says something." Victoria, "He's going to hate me. He's going to lose it completely." Tyler, "It doesn't matter anymore. You made your choice weeks ago." I just stared at my phone screen, reading the same 3 lines over and over again, trying to process what this meant for everything I thought I knew about my life. Lily added quietly, "She said she was going to talk to you today, probably to try to spin the whole situation somehow. Just be ready for whatever story she comes up with." I said, "Thanks for telling me," and hung up the phone. Victoria came home around 4 p.m. that day. She tried to act normal at first, putting her keys down gently and taking off her coat slowly, like she was rehearsing each movement. I stayed sitting in the living room, didn't say anything, and just waited for her to make the first move. "Can we sit down and talk?" she asked, like we hadn't been living under the same roof without really speaking for the past 3 days. I nodded and sat across from her on the couch. I already knew what she was going to tell me, but I wanted to hear what kind of fantasy she was planning to sell me. She started slow and deliberate. "I need to be completely honest with you about something. I've been feeling really neglected in this relationship for months now. You're always working late, you come home exhausted, and you barely look at me anymore. It's like I'm just part of your daily schedule instead of someone you actually want to be with." I nodded, still listening and waiting for her to get to the real point. She took my silence as permission to continue. "Tyler made me feel seen in a way that I haven't felt in a long time. He actually listened when I talked about my job, about my goals and dreams for the future. You used to do that, but lately it feels like I'm just background noise in your life. I raised an eyebrow. So you slept with my brother? She blinked like my directness had thrown her off her prepared script. Then her tone changed completely, becoming sharper and more defensive, like she was the one making the moral judgment here. This isn't just about cheating, Marcus. Tyler understood me in ways that you stopped trying to. He made me feel wanted and appreciated. Do you have any idea what it's like to feel completely invisible in your own relationship? I leaned back in my chair. You're really going to try to make this sound like I somehow failed you. She didn't even hesitate. I'm not saying I handled everything perfectly, but Tyler didn't pressure me or manipulate me. He was just there for me when you weren't. You mean when I was working double shifts to pay for our wedding? I pointed out. She actually rolled her eyes at that. You think throwing money at things automatically makes you a good partner. There's more to a relationship than just financial contributions. That was the moment I realized she had fully convinced herself that this whole situation was reasonable, that she was somehow evolving as a person, and I was just collateral damage in her journey of self-discovery. I stood up, walked over to the kitchen counter, and grabbed the folder I had prepared earlier in the week. It contained screenshots, timestamps, voice memos, basically everything that Lily had sent me, organized and printed out. I dropped it on the coffee table in front of her. You can save the rest of your explanation, I said calmly. Lily sent me everything. I already know about the pregnancy, the months of planning, all of it. She looked like someone had just slapped her across the face. You talked to Lily? No, I corrected. She talked to me because she actually has a conscience and couldn't watch you destroy multiple people's lives without saying something. She started flipping through the pages, seeing her own words printed out in black and white. She saw the message where she asked Tyler if he thought I would ever find out about their relationship. She saw the voice memo where she said I was safe and boring, and that Tyler made her feel like a real woman for the first time in years. She tried to start crying, but I wasn't buying the performance anymore. I was going to tell you everything, she said through fake tears. Right now, but only because you knew I'd already cornered you with evidence, I replied. Marcus, please, we can work through this. I walked over to the front door and opened it wide. You wanted to feel seen and appreciated? I see you now for exactly who you are. Get out of my apartment. She stood there frozen for a moment, cycling through tears, excuses, and bargaining tactics. But none of it mattered anymore. The person I thought I was building a life with had never actually existed. She finally walked out, and I closed the door behind her. Then I picked up my phone and called Tyler directly. He answered like he had been sitting by his phone waiting for this exact call. What did she tell you? He asked before I could even say hello. She came to me, man, he said, his voice already defensive. I didn't chase her or pursue her. Don't try to make this my problem. You slept with my fiancée, I said simply. She was already halfway gone from your relationship, he replied. I just didn't lie to myself about seeing it happen. I hung up on him. I grabbed my keys, got in my car, and drove straight to Tyler's apartment. But when I got to his door, it wasn't just Tyler waiting for me. My parents were there too, like they had been called in as moral backup for whatever confrontation was about to happen. Tyler opened the door and actually looked smug for a split second, before remembering that he was supposed to look sorry about the whole situation. Marcus, look, I didn't mean for it to happen like this, he started. But before he could continue, my mom stepped forward. He's hurting too, you know. This wasn't easy for him either. I blinked in disbelief. You're serious right now? My dad nodded with his arms crossed. Sometimes people connect in ways that we don't expect or plan for. You just need to be the bigger man here and think about what's best for everyone. The bigger man? I repeated. For what, getting stabbed in the back by my own brother? My mom raised her voice. It wasn't like that, and you know it. You've been cold and distant for months, Marcus. Victoria told us how neglected she's been feeling. I cut her off. I don't care what Victoria told you. She cheated on me with him, and you're all standing here defending it like it's some kind of romantic love story. Tyler stepped closer to me. I made a mistake, okay? You think I haven't been paying for it emotionally? You haven't paid for anything in your entire life, I said, looking him directly in the eye. I've been paying for your mistakes, your failures, your reputation, and even your silence. Not anymore. I looked at my parents one more time. Enjoy the son you've always protected, the one you've always made excuses for. Then I turned around and walked away from all of them. But my family didn't back off after that confrontation. Instead, they doubled down on their campaign to make me the villain in this entire situation. It started with a series of texts from my mom that got progressively more manipulative. You need to let go of this anger. There's a baby involved now, and that changes everything. Tyler is your brother, and that child is going to be your niece or nephew, whether you like it or not. Family is family. Then my dad decided to get involved with his own guilt trip messages. You think you're the only one hurting here? Your mother is sick with worry over this whole situation. Tyler is stressed out of his mind. Victoria is struggling with the pregnancy, and you're just making everything worse for everyone. Worse, like I was the one who had climbed into bed with my sibling's fiancé and blown up an entire family structure. Then came the group messages that included extended family members. My aunt, several cousins, all repeating the same basic script. One mistake shouldn't tear a family apart. You have to think about the baby now. Be the bigger person. Families survive things like this when everyone is mature enough to focus on what really matters. I muted the entire group chat after the first day of that nonsense. The next day, I found a handwritten letter in my mailbox. No postage stamp, just hand-delivered and dropped in. It was my mom's handwriting, and it was one long guilt trip written in cursive. Families survive challenges like this when everyone involved is mature enough to focus on what matters most. You used to be so strong and level-headed. I know that person is still in there somewhere, and I'm hoping he'll come back before it's too late. There was no apology anywhere in the letter. No acknowledgement that Tyler and Victoria had done anything wrong. No ownership of the fact that my parents had enabled this situation by always protecting Tyler from consequences. Just one long manipulation tactic dressed up as concern for family unity. That same night, I blocked 3 phone numbers and reported an unknown number for harassment when they started calling me repeatedly from different phones. When the text messages and phone calls didn't work, they started getting desperate and trying more direct approaches. Tyler showed up at my gym one evening while I was finishing my workout. I was completing my second set on the heavy bag when I heard someone shouting behind me. I turned around and saw him walking straight toward me like he was the one who had been wronged in this entire situation. You need to stop this, he snapped as he got closer. I pulled out one earbud. Stop what exactly? Acting like a spoiled brat, he said, his voice rising. You're punishing everyone because Victoria chose me over you. That was his first mistake, saying that loud enough for other people in the gym to hear. I let him keep digging his own grave. You're making this whole thing about your wounded ego. My parents can't even focus on the upcoming baby right now because they're too worried about your tantrum. He stepped even closer, really getting worked up now. You're putting stress on everyone around you, and for what? You lost, Marcus. Just move on. He said that in public, loud enough for several people to turn and stare at us. You got embarrassed, he added, his voice getting louder. That's all this really is. You thought Victoria was locked down and committed to you, but guess what? She wanted me instead. And now there's a baby coming, and all you're doing is crying because you didn't see it coming. He moved closer to me, invading my personal space. You're not the victim here. You're just bitter that someone else recognized Victoria's worth before you did. That was his second mistake. I didn't even think about it. My right hand was already clenched in a fist, and I threw one clean punch directly across his jaw. His head whipped sideways from the impact, and he stumbled backward, slamming into the row of lockers behind him. The entire gym went completely silent. Another guy nearby stepped forward like he thought a full brawl was about to break out. But it wasn't necessary because Tyler wasn't charging back at me. He wasn't swinging or trying to retaliate. He was just trying to stay on his feet, holding his mouth like he couldn't believe I had actually hit him. You're not the victim either, I said calmly. You're a coward and a leech. You've had every opportunity in the world to build your own life, but instead, you waited for mine to get stable and successful, just so you could hijack it. Blood was trickling from his nose, and he looked genuinely shocked that there had finally been a real consequence for his actions. One of the gym trainers came over and told Tyler he needed to leave immediately. Tyler turned around, still holding his face, and muttered something about pressing charges against me. No, Tyler, I called after him. I finally made things fair between us. He stormed out, still muttering threats under his breath. I knew the fallout from hitting him was going to be immediate and intense. I just didn't expect them to walk right into making themselves look even worse. Victoria texted me first. So you're violent now? You just showed your true colors. You always acted like you were the mature, responsible one, but the second things don't go your way, you throw punches like a child. You're disgusting. You're not a victim, Marcus. You're just bitter that someone else recognized my value. I replied with one line, "Go to hell, Victoria." Then I blocked her number and forwarded her entire message to my lawyer, because I was already planning my next moves. I sat down on my couch that evening and opened my laptop to check my emails. Then my phone rang with a call from someone I hadn't expected to hear from. My Aunt Patricia. I almost ignored it, assuming it was going to be more pressure and guilt trips about family unity, but something told me to answer. Her voice was serious when she spoke. I just heard about what happened with your brother. Marcus, there's something you need to know, and I've kept my mouth shut about it for way too long, but I can't stay quiet anymore. She paused, and I could tell she was choosing her words carefully. Your grandfather left a trust fund for both you and Tyler when he died. Equal shares, $85,000 each. I was there when he signed all the documents and made his intentions very clear. I felt my blood pressure start to rise as she continued. But your parents told the rest of the family that you didn't want your share. They said you were too proud and independent, that you wanted to do everything yourself without any help. Tyler got access to his portion when he turned 22, and he's been burning through it ever since. Failed businesses, expensive cars, whatever he wanted. My hands were shaking as I held the phone. But they took your share and funneled it into another account. They said it was safer that way, that they were protecting it until you were ready. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I thought you knew about all of this. I sat there in complete silence, my brain on fire. That money could have changed everything for me, helped with student loans, housing costs, given me the financial stability and freedom that I'd been working multiple jobs to achieve. And they had stolen it to bankroll their favorite son's endless string of failures. I should have told you years ago, Aunt Patricia whispered. No, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. You told me at exactly the perfect time. The next morning, I met with my lawyer again and showed him everything I had compiled. We filed a formal civil claim for fiduciary misconduct and financial theft. My Aunt Patricia agreed to testify about the existence of the trust fund and the deliberate deception that had been carried out for years. While the paper trail was somewhat weak due to the time that had passed, her witness testimony was absolutely solid gold for our case. My lawyer filed the complaint that same afternoon. After the legal paperwork was submitted, the inevitable confrontation came. I heard the knock on my door and checked the peephole. My mom and dad, of course, probably coming to deliver another guilt trip about family loyalty. I stepped outside to meet them instead of letting them into my apartment. My mom started immediately before I could even fully close the door behind me. You punched your brother in the face like some kind of animal. What is wrong with you? He showed up at my gym screaming at me in public, I replied calmly. I gave him exactly what he came looking for. My dad stepped forward with his arms crossed. You've gone too far with this whole thing. You are tearing everyone apart. No, I replied. Your decades of favoritism did that. Victoria's betrayal did that. Tyler being a walking parasite his entire life did that. My mom's voice got higher and more emotional. You think this is all about you. But that baby is going to be your niece or nephew, and you're acting like a spoiled brat who can't handle when things don't go his way. No, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm acting like a man who finally stopped letting his own family walk all over him. That seemed to hit a nerve with both of them. You were always like this, my dad barked, his face getting red. Always miserable and resentful when things didn't go exactly your way. That's why people pull away from you. That's why Victoria left. Because you never learned how to make people feel wanted or appreciated. I smiled at that, which seemed to confuse them. You know what's funny about what you just said? I asked. You raised me to be responsible, to work hard, to be loyal to family. But you hated me for actually doing those things. They didn't respond, so I kept going. Tyler fails upward his entire life, and you call him ambitious. I work my ass off, and somehow I'm bitter. I take care of my responsibilities, and suddenly I'm controlling. Victoria cheats on me with my own brother, and you're out here crying about her feelings and his stress levels. My mom started to interrupt, but I raised my hand and cut her off. You want to talk about why I apparently don't deserve good things in life? Let's go there. I looked both of them directly in the eyes. You made sure I worked my way through school, while Tyler burned through every dollar that Grandpa left for him. You told me I wasn't mature enough to manage money, then secretly gave mine to him. Their eyes widened in shock. I know about the trust fund, I said clearly. Aunt Patricia told me everything. Grandpa left me $85,000. You rerouted it and stole it from me. Then you told the rest of the family that I was just too self-sufficient and proud to need any help. My mom's voice cracked. We did what we thought was best for both of you. No, I said firmly. You did what was easiest for you. You fed Tyler until he believed he deserved everything, and now you're mad because I finally stopped starving myself to keep the peace. I took a step closer to them. You think I'm cruel, because I finally drew a line in the sand. You think I'm dangerous because I punched a man who publicly humiliated me and tried to make me look like a fool. Let me tell you something. If Tyler wasn't my brother, he would have left that gym with a mouthful of broken teeth. I held back for your sake. Neither of them said a word. I don't owe you anything anymore, I continued. My mom whispered, "We were just trying to hold the family together." I nodded slowly. By blaming the only person who didn't lie, cheat, or steal. Great strategy. Then I pulled out my phone and hit the record button, making sure they could see what I was doing. "This is your final notice," I said clearly into the phone. "You are not welcome at my home anymore. If you show up here again, I will file for a protective order. I'm not giving you the opportunity to twist this story when you talk to other people." My dad took a breath like he was going to say something, but I didn't let him. "And just so we're completely clear," I said, making eye contact with him. "Every message, every voicemail, every well-meaning phone call from a flying monkey family member, it's all already in a file. My lawyer is sending cease and desist notices today." I turned around and opened my door to go back inside. "Oh, and that baby?" I called over my shoulder. "You better hope it turns out nothing like its parents, because if it does, you'll finally understand what it's like to raise a real disappointment." Then I shut the door behind me. Within a few days, the cease and desist notices were filed, served, and confirmed. My restraining order request was in process. Legal separation from this entire toxic mess was underway. Peace was finally on its way. When the court date arrived, they tried to put on a show for the judge. Victoria's lawyer attempted to paint her as deeply remorseful, claiming that she never intended to cause harm and that emotions during engagements can be complex and difficult to navigate. Tyler's lawyer went with the young and stupid defense, claiming that Tyler had been manipulated by his own feelings and that it was just a lapse in moral judgment rather than a pattern of behavior. Then it was my lawyer's turn. He simply opened a folder and handed the judge a neatly prepared binder containing everything we had compiled. Screenshot after screenshot of Victoria and Tyler mocking me behind my back. Voice memos from Victoria saying I was safe and predictable, and that she had been planning her exit strategy for months. Text messages between Tyler and my parents where they called me too sensitive and made fun of my job. The gym security footage of Tyler screaming at me and getting in my face. Aunt Patricia's sworn affidavit detailing the trust fund theft. Bank records showing exactly how my inheritance money had been funneled into family accounts to fund Tyler's various failed ventures. The judge flipped through the binder page by page while the other side sat in complete silence, squirming in their seats. Then came the best part of the entire hearing. My lawyer said, "Your Honor, our position is very simple. My client wants protection from ongoing harassment and manipulation from this coordinated campaign to drag his name through the mud after being betrayed, stolen from, and emotionally violated by these people for years." The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the ceiling fan clicking overhead. Victoria turned red and blotchy, like she couldn't figure out which emotion to display. Anger, embarrassment, or shame. Tyler just looked down at the floor, suddenly very interested in the texture of the carpet. My parents sat frozen in their seats. The judge turned to address the entire gallery and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This isn't just a family falling apart. This is a coordinated effort to isolate and manipulate one man for years. I'm not here to fix your family dynamics. I'm here to make sure Mr. Rodriguez never has to deal with any of you again unless he specifically chooses to." And then the rulings came down like a hammer. Restraining orders granted across the board. Cease and desist notices upheld and legally enforceable. Financial claim moved to full trial with discovery beginning in 30 days. My parents tried to say something to me on the way out of the courthouse, but the bailiff immediately shut it down. Outside the courthouse, Tyler looked like a kicked puppy. Victoria was crying those fake tears again. My mom had her hand pressed to her chest like she was about to faint from the stress. And my dad couldn't even look me in the eye. A family of liars, finally caught in public with their mess spilled out in legal documents and audio recordings. They walked out of that courthouse looking like trash bags that someone had dragged across the street and left in the sun to rot. And I walked out like I had just closed the final chapter of a book I would never have to read again. 2 days later, I received a message from a phone number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, I realized it was from my dad, who had apparently gotten a new number to try to bypass my blocks. The message read, "We didn't think it would go this far. Just drop the money case and we'll sign whatever you want. Just stop before you destroy us completely." I immediately forwarded the message to my lawyer with the subject line, "New message, confirmed coercion attempt." This was exactly the kind of evidence we needed to show that their harassment was ongoing and deliberate. 3 weeks later, my company accepted my request for an internal transfer. It was the same role and responsibilities, just at a different branch in another state. I packed up my entire life, signed the lease on a new apartment, and left Tampa without looking back. It felt incredible to finally have geographical distance between me and all the toxicity I was leaving behind. A couple of days after I got settled in my new city, I decided to visit the local animal shelter. I wasn't really planning on getting a pet, but something drew me there. I ended up picking out a dog, just a mixed breed mutt with no fancy pedigree or special story. He's simple and straightforward. He eats, he sleeps, and he minds his own business, which is honestly more than I can say for most of the people I left behind in my old life. As far as I'm concerned, that's the end of the whole saga. I've moved on completely, built a new life in a new place, and I'm finally at peace. I have a job I'm good at, a dog who's loyal and uncomplicated, and absolutely zero drama from people who think they're entitled to my time, energy, or forgiveness. The legal case is still ongoing, but my lawyer is handling everything, and I'm confident we'll get a favorable outcome. The restraining orders are in place and being enforced. My family has no way to contact me or show up in my life uninvited. Victoria and Tyler can deal with their pregnancy and their relationship drama without involving me in any of it. I appreciate everyone who took the time to read through this entire mess. It was a long journey to get to this point, but I'm finally free from all the manipulation and toxicity that defined my family relationships for so many years. For anyone dealing with similar situations, sometimes the only way to win is to completely remove yourself from the game. You don't owe loyalty to people who have repeatedly shown you that they don't respect you or value your well-being. Blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to treat you like garbage, and you're not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. I might not respond to every comment on this post, but I do read them all. Thanks for listening to my story.